Okay, welcome to our second episode of Esquire Unfiltered.
Esquire Unfiltered.
My name is Greg Stapp. I'm here with my son, Andrew, who's been helping me with the technological part of this. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be able to do this. So I want to give a shout out to him. And then want to say I hope you enjoyed the first episode. We'll try to change these up a little bit. That's part of what we're doing tonight. We're going to do more of a question and answer. I'm going to talk about the second topic that you all wanted me to discuss, which was the issue with taxpayers who went to a school district or a school board meeting, were eventually arrested many weeks later, which I will talk to you about, and eventually went to a criminal jury trial. I can't make this up. And were convicted for defiant trespass as a taxpayer for trying to attend a school board meeting. So I'm gonna say to Andrew, I'm guessing you didn't hear about this.
No. Where did this happen?
So I'm here in Williamsport, as you know, which is the home of the Little League World Series. I'm learning to enunciate. Was living in Montoursville for a while. Our big opponent there in Montoursville, at least one of them was, as you know, Southern Columbia School District. Big football school, right?
Mm-hmm. Wrestling too.
Yeah, so that's where it happened. And a group of Patriot folks in the Columbia County area came to me with the situation when it happened. And, you know, the interesting thing about it is the discovery. And again, I know we're calling the show Esquire Unfiltered, so we want you guys to understand things we say that are, as lawyers, that you may say, what are you talking about, Greg? So discovery is what we call the information that we get in a litigation, whether it's a criminal case, whether it's a civil case, anything we get through the process of what we call discovery, which we do through depositions, which are shot in rooms like this. Sometimes we videotape those, or we get them through interrogatories, which is written questions. In criminal, it's real simple. You kind of get a big packet. But the criminal discovery showed, in this case, that the DA actually said when he got the information about what happened that night, which we're going to talk about, I don't want to charge him. I don't want to charge him with a crime. You know, two of my folks were grandparents, one of which, as part of a church, I think was a missionary for some period of time. And got arrested for this. So they did it because the superintendent, who I'm going to quote tonight, asked the district attorney to charge them. And so he did.
Wow.
Yeah, so the story is essentially this. We were in the middle of, or sort of through parts of the pandemic. The school was in full... You know, we need to have masks on in the school building mode. There was a big issue with signage because there was no sign. There was no sign that night for entering the school, no sign going through the hallway. We had the whole video. We had all these security videos. Nothing that told them that if you want to attend the meeting tonight, you have to wear a mask. They went into the school, the library it will be, and the security officer for the school immediately came up to the individuals who were coming in, most of whom in the video we saw were members of this Patriot group who wanted to attend, to be good citizens, to start paying attention to what's happening in our society. And they were offered the dreaded mask. And I say that word because if you don't know this already, those blue masks that they were handing out to everybody, first of all, I think they were made in China. Secondly, they had fibers in them that are terrible, terrible for you to breathe in. And I could show you some videos on that. Well, not as part of this podcast, but horribly bad for you. I told people if you have to wear a mask during that time frame, you know, get a cotton one, take an old T-shirt, like rip it up and make a mask out of it. Almost anything's better than those blue things. But
I had a Star Wars one.
Right. So my daughter, I have another child. She got me one that had a freedom reference. So I have it somewhere. I think I kept that one. So
you liked yours more than my Star Wars one?
I probably only because it involved freedom, which is what we're talking about on this show. Yeah. So In any event, some of the folks in our group that I ended up representing said thanks but no thanks to the mask. The superintendent then came out and was sort of like, you need to wear a mask. And as frequently happens during this time frame, I had it happen to me personally at a school board meeting with a large group of people. They go into sort of panic mode. So the way school boards address panic mode is they do something called executive session. So if you're not familiar with school boards and how they work in Pennsylvania, hoping people in other states watch this, school boards have 9 people. They are elected. They also have a superintendent, assistant superintendent who works underneath them. And when you go into these executive sessions, they typically handle things like hiring and firing, things they don't want people to know publicly. So it's a private session, essentially, with just the school board and their lawyer, their solicitors, they call it. So in any event, they went into executive session. We had the same thing happen in the meeting I was in, and then we ended up all going outside. This actually happened in Montoursville. So because they were so worried about so many people being in a room together. Now, this particular night, there weren't that many people. Very large library, as you can see in the video. So what they did was they said to the folks in the room, including my clients, please go to the cafeteria while we sort this out. They didn't say those exact words, but, please wait. We'll be back in touch with you. So everybody went to the cafeteria, which was down the hall. The video shows people sitting in there. Some of the people that were wearing masks in the cafeteria took them off. So now we had more than the 3 people that I represented in the case with masks off in the cafeteria who were not arrested, which again kind of didn't make a lot of sense to me. And they ended up being in the building a total of about 34. They claimed 41 minutes. That's not accurate. They actually came and walked through the door, went into the library, went to the cafeteria. Essentially, they called the police. A local police officer came. Poor guy, I think, was on the side of freedom. And when I say freedom, I mean not locking us down, not masking us up, people that believe in the Fourth Amendment, people that believe in the First Amendment right to free speech, people that are, in my opinion, American. And he was sort of like, look, guys, they want you to wear a mask. And they explained to him that we don't think that they have the power to make us wear a mask, which they did not legally. And so we're not going to wear one. So they were very polite to the officer. I think one of the parents in the room, not one of my clients, even said, do you really have to even be here? Can you leave? Like, is it possible for you to leave? And eventually he actually did, because he didn't know what to do. So as he exits the room, all this is on video, folks. We see him on his cell phone typing in his chief to say, I don't even know what to do. In the meantime, the security officer explains to them, well, the district attorney issued a memo about this being possibly defiant trespass and, honoring the school. So the folks got together in the cafeteria, had a conversation, said, you know what, we'll leave. We're honest people, we're decent citizens. We wanted to come tonight, but if it's going to be this much trouble, we'll leave so the other folks here can be here for the meeting. One guy wanted to make a presentation on how masks didn't work to prevent viruses. He actually had a machine because that was his field of expertise. So they left. Nothing happened. Weeks went by. As I said earlier, in the discovery, we found out that they eventually asked, the superintendent said to the district attorney, who he knew, this is a small town, folks. It's in the Bloomsburg area. We want you to arrest these people. And he did. So, and what they were arrested with is defiant trespass. Now, Andrew, do you know what defiant trespass is?
I could take a guess, but I'm more curious. When did this happen? When was the
So this is
initial
all
meeting?
September of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of in the heart of it all.
Right.
And we're going to talk about it today. That's why I wanted to talk about this. We're going to talk about a couple of federal laws, including one that I'm guessing a lot of you have never heard about, that you should know about, and you really need to know how much money was attached to it, because it's outrageous sums, and it explains a lot about what happened in this case, and explains a lot about all the school board meetings I went to. I met with parent groups in Milton, Pennsylvania, Loyalsock, Montoursville, all over. I was all over the state talking to different parents, and they actually were asking me to go to meetings to speak for them because I get paid to speak. So I hope I do it well in this video, because I found I don't enunciate sometimes. And I can speak very quickly. You only have 3 minutes. Every board's the same. You get like 3 minutes to say your piece. You better say it quick and sit down. So it explains a lot about it. But anyway, go ahead. What was your next question?
I was just wondering when it all happened, because COVID was really weird with the timeline. Because, March 14th is when Montoursville, which is where I was going to high school at the time, shut down and said, like, hey, you're leaving for 2 weeks. And then after like a week, they said, hey, you're not coming back for a while because we don't know what this is. And, everyone was freaked out. And masks came along. Everyone had to wear one. You didn't leave your house. So I was just wondering when the timeline is, because then I went off to college, late August, and they said they weren't going to do masks. And then day before classes start,
right.
That's a whole nother story. We don't have to get into that right now.
But Andrew and I have a very memorable dinner at Texas Roadhouse where, first of all, the lights went off.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit spooky because the lights went off, and then as we're sitting there trying to enjoy our dinner, and by the way, my check had cleared for both of my kids to go to the school. They sent me an email while I'm having this nice dinner with both my kids. My daughter was there too, was still attending, and said, hey, by the way, your kids are going to have to mask up when they come back, which they were back. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I don't think it'll surprise you if you know me on this podcast. If you don't, you should know about me that I became very angry. I don't typically start throwing things in the Texas Roadhouse, but I became very vocal about my anger with both my kids, and was sort of like, you guys need to fight back. You better tell them you're not wearing a mask because they don't work. Because at this point, I knew everything about the masks, which if you don't know, they don't work. They're a bit like a sieve. Anybody in the medical community who I have tons of clients that are doctors and nurses will tell you they are only used for bacterial infection. So they wear them during surgery because they don't want to get you infected with bacteria while they've got you cut open. They don't work for viruses. They never have. Everyone in the medical community knows that. And when I say don't work, I mean to keep you from getting it or to keep you from giving it to somebody else. It doesn't work either way. Mm-hmm. It's basically like wearing a chain link fence with big holes in it. It doesn't matter. The molecules go right through the mask. So, but anyway, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, the honey butter was flying at Texas Roadhouse.
I don't remember rolls, that, but it was
the steak.
I was starting to get upset. Yeah, I'd eaten, I think, at that point, but there was like it's very surreal with the lights off, because then they couldn't figure out how to get the lights on.
No,
and I think we left. We paid. Yeah, we tried to pay with the lights because the computers were down, so it was kind of weird. So it was nice to get a free meal. It was an upsetting circumstance. I won't forget that night. So.
No, but no. I mean, I was just curious with the timeline, because then people got really serious about masks again, late August. Early September. So it makes sense for the timeline that they would be having a meeting and it would get really heated quickly, at least with the superintendent. I mean, some people had no idea what was going on. Some were totally opposed. Some were totally for. I mean, now it's mellowed out a little bit more, but yeah.
Well, if you're wearing a mask now, then you really should do some research. But in any event, your point is well made, and there's a reason for that. So in August of 2021, Secretary Beam, as she's known, B-E-A-M, I think her first name was Allison. She issued an order. Now, who is Secretary Beam? Secretary Beam was the Secretary of the Department of Health for Pennsylvania. So that's the Pennsylvania Department of Health. Typically, that position is filled by a doctor, right? It's Department of Health. So you would think it would have a doctor. Allison Beam, Secretary Beam, was a lawyer. So that makes a lot of sense. So, because I did surgery this week.
Technically a doctor.
Yeah, right? I did JD. I did surgery this week, folks. I didn't do surgery this week. Please don't comment.
Don't hit him up for surgery.
Right. I don't. Yeah.
It won't go well.
Right, unless it's like taking a splinter out of your finger. So, in any event, she wrote this order that basically said mask up again. Told the schools, every school's got to mask up. Now, that was really for high schools, elementary schools, for grade schools. But I guess in your case, this is Messiah University. We'll just say it. They took it like, well, we're going to do it too. So that's why. That's why you saw this case happen, because suddenly they were being required to do it. Now, that leads to my point I want to make tonight. That I'm a little ashamed to say I didn't realize until later in this case. When I say later, I mean, we were actually at the trial phase when he mentioned this, and then even in appeal, we appealed this all the way through to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and then on to the United States Supreme Court, which is what I wanted to talk about this case for, because the reason we appealed at the U.S. Supreme Court was very different than the reason I appealed it at all the courts in Pennsylvania. And just so everybody knows, I want to say this just quickly, and I'll maybe even throw a diagram up if I can make one really simple, because we had somebody talk about this in a meeting I was at this week. So the court system in Pennsylvania, every state is different. Okay, I'm only talking about our Commonwealth. We have what are called magisterial district judges. That's your lowest level, like a small claims court. What we call the Court of Common Pleas. Criminal cases get heard. You get divorced there. Any type of normal cases where it goes. If you appeal it, it goes to one of two courts, either the Commonwealth Court or the Superior Court, depending on what it involves. If it involves workers' compensation, it goes to the Commonwealth Court. If it involves civil stuff, it typically goes to the Superior Court. And then every one of those cases, whether they go to the Superior Court or the Commonwealth Court, goes to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is your last court here before you have to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And the only way you can appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court is through a process we call allocatur, which is ALLOCATUR, which basically means you're requesting for your case to be heard. And they don't have to take it. They can say, no, we're not going to take it. But
well, does that work the same way as the U.S. Supreme Court, where they only hear a certain amount of cases per year? And
yes.
They're required to hit a certain amount, but beyond that, they usually...
There actually is no requirement. It's about I think it's about 1 to 5%. It's not even close to 5%. Very few. And that's why I wasn't really surprised my case didn't get heard, but it should have been heard, and I'm going to explain to you why tonight. So back to your point, which is well made. She issued the order. This incident happens. We eventually go to a full-blown trial. Now, they tried to offer us a deal. My clients, to their credit, and I can't say enough about my clients, I think they're fantastic people, said, no, we're not going to take a deal. We did not commit a crime. We did anything wrong. This is America now, so you are innocent until proven guilty. Our society seems to be the opposite now. It feels like when you're watching social media, it's you're guilty until proven innocent. And that needs to stop. But in any event, they were wanting to fight this. So during the trial, Superintendent Becker took the stand, and he talked about this American Rescue Plan Act, which I had heard about, but I guess I didn't really think about it in terms of why are they masking these kids up? Why are they following these CDC guidelines, which make no sense? Because I know Andrew knows I was quoting incessantly, and unfortunately for him, he had to hear it that night at the Texas Roadhouse. March 31st of 2021, the CDC issued a study that they did on masks. The time frame was March to the end of December of 2020. Their own study said there was no statistical difference of wearing masks versus not wearing masks with the prevention of COVID-19. COVID-19, also known as SARS-CoV-2, no difference. So we talked about it that night, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was giving them ammunition to use to say, look, the CDC even says it. Now, by the way, the CDC report that came out on, which was 5 pages, said mask up. Wear a mask, but if you read it, it was like, but they don't work. So you're telling me to do something that, and I used to tell all the school boards I went in front of, if a student wrote this in a science class, like this was my hypothesis, you would give him an F. Yeah, because your conclusion was they don't work, and then you're telling people, but they do work. So now we know why. And he quoted it, and I have him here, and I'm going to give you these. Like I said, I'm going to give you the transcripts. These are all screenshots. During the trial, and this is on direct examination, so this is not me questioning him, folks. This is his own lawyer questioning him, saying, Section 2001I1 of the American Rescue Plan, ARP Act, requires each local education agency, LEA, that receives funding under the ARP Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, otherwise known as ESSER. And if you were me, you heard this used all the time, the ESSER funds. We're getting ESSER money, ESSER. Fund to develop and make publicly available on the LEA's, again, that's your local education agency, website, a safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan, hereinafter referred to as a health and safety plan. Again, if you're a parent and you're watching this, you probably heard this term, health and safety plan, right? But there's more to it. The health and safety plan had to include the CDC requirements, and it required them to follow the masking. The next question this is the district attorney, Tom Leipold. What's the first of those safety recommendations established by the CDC under Section A? Universal and correct wearing of masks, which just the idea of the government telling you how to correctly wear a mask is sort of hilarious to me. But anyway, So that's how it happened. And then here's the side of it that becomes so important for the U.S. Supreme Court case. Andrew, do you know how much money the federal government set aside in the American Rescue Plan Act to pay to schools all across America to get them to make their kids wear masks universally and correctly?
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to guess 11.1 billion.
So way, way more. You're 11 times off. So over $122 billion was paid.
That was good math.
So, yeah, thank you. So I'm on the PSEA.org website. That is the Pennsylvania State Education Association. Again, we'll give you this link. American Rescue Plan provides historic school funding. And here it tells you PA schools receive $6.46 billion in supplemental funding meant to combat the unprecedented learning loss that occurred during the pandemic. So, folks, fancy it up however you want. They paid your school. Montoursville got about $3 to $4 million to put a mask on your kid. And then, as Superintendent Becker explained, every 6 months we had to be checking the CDC guidelines. We were required to follow those. And in fact, I have the ARP Act here, where it says that you have to develop strategies in implementing public health protocols, including to the greatest extent practical policies in line with guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the reopening and operation of school facilities to effectively maintain health and safety of the students, educators, and staff. Now, what happens if you don't do this? You don't get the money. It's really that simple. Says right in here, now blow my screen up to 400%, so that's a little too big. A local education agency, that's the LEA, that receives funds shall reserve not less than 20%. So there's 20% for this other stuff, and I'm not going to go through that. There's quite a bit of stuff here. But then it says under paragraph 2, shall use the remaining funds for any of the following. So the other 80% you have to use for stuff only if you are doing what they require you to. If you don't do it, you don't get the money. So if you are a parent who went to a school board meeting, or a student for that matter, or a teacher, if you're, I'll use a better word, Andrew, if you're a citizen who went to a school board meeting in 2020 or 2021, particularly after the Beam order came down, which eventually was found illegal, by the way, and talked to a school board like I did, and saw people with masks on, by the way. So all you could see was their eyes, but the part of their body you could see their eyes, you could see glazing over as if they were saying to you, are you almost done? Like, are you going to be, just with the talking, like, I hope are you done now? Because I've got like lunch or dinner waiting. So if you felt that way, the reason why is because you didn't walk in with cash or money. I'm guessing if you'd had a $3 to $4 million check, they probably would have listened a little bit closer to you. If you had said, I'll give you $4 million not to put the mask on, they probably you would have had their rapt attention to say, oh, geez, I didn't know you were going to offer us money. That's why we're doing this in the first place. So if you didn't know that, I didn't know it. I was litigating this, much less a lawyer. So, and that's the big issue that I tried to raise in our Supreme Court case.
Yeah. I mean, that whole time was crazy because no one ever cared about those school board meetings. At least no one in my life prior to COVID. And then when COVID started blowing up and everyone was wearing a mask, and I know for Montoursville High School, they had the really weird thing where they said everyone go home, and then we had like a 6-month summer. And then when we tried to come back, we did this weird hybrid schedule, and then we were back remote, and then we were hybrid and full-time. It's very weird. But I remember my friends and some people I didn't like in my grade, everyone was like, yeah, I'm going to the school board meeting. It's like, why? Why do you care? Like, who's ever cared about a school board meeting? At least from a student's perspective. I never did, but that was what COVID brought. I mean, people really started caring about that kind of thing.
Right, which I think is sad commentary about all of us. And I'm the first one I used to tell everybody I spoke to in 2020 and 2021, and I spoke to thousands of people. I'm to blame. I was busy raising him and his sister, and watching ESPN, fantasy football, whatever, just living my life, not paying attention to the government. The local school district is a government. It's absolutely positively a government agency. If you read Title 25, you will see that it is structured just like our government. It's 9 people, again, intended not to avoid ties. You get 5-4 votes. They are elected officials for each district in their area, and they are elected to represent you, the folks in their district. If they're not doing that, you should fire them. Like, you should get somebody else to represent you in the school board, because that's not how that's supposed to work. So having said that, the reason why I wanted to talk about this case, and there's a much longer story to how they were found guilty, because we talked about the Emergency Use Authorization Act, which is the act that governed everything that happened during the pandemic, that sort of allowed everything to happen from the vaccines to the use of masks, because they were considered devices. The judge did not agree with me. He was kiboshing that at every stage. He wouldn't let me ask questions. And then eventually made an illegal jury instruction to the jury saying that the school district, Southern Columbia, had the right to implement school masks, even though they don't, because the legislature has to do that. Again, they're under the school board or the school code, and the Pennsylvania Department of Health should have a say in that. So I'm not going to get into all that stuff tonight, because I think it's rather complicated. But
I do have 2 questions for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one, do you get paid for being on a school board?
I think the answer is no. No, I don't believe you get paid at all.
So why do it?
Well, that's part of the problem, is most people didn't want to do it. So you got people that weren't really that engaged. Sometimes you get retired folks,
right,
who do it because somebody has to do it. So, the group that I belong to, the Patriot Group, we've gotten a ton of people on the school board, and that's part of what we're trying to do, is to start engaging our society so that we can take back our society, because essentially what's happening is these laws, and this is some of them here, and we're going to talk about a couple more that have been around for a long time, are very troubling. And that's what we argued in the U.S. Supreme Court case. And actually, let me go to this other one first. So I'll read this to you. So we argued when I say we, I had some help writing this from an individual who has experience with the Supreme Court of the United States, which I did not. So, but I think our work is outstanding. And again, we'll put a screenshot up of the question presented so you can see it. But there was a case in America called the Prince, P-R-I-N-T-Z versus United States case. It's 521 U.S. We call it U.S. 898. It's a 1997 case. Justice Scalia ruled on it. And in that case, the Supreme Court of the United States held unconstitutional a federal law obligating state officials to implement a federal regulatory scheme. And what Justice Scalia said was that Congress had begun to enact statutes which indirectly required the participation of state or local officials, like a school district, in implementing federal regulatory schemes as a condition of, wait for it, federal funding grants, and noted that these schemes should be addressed, quote, if and when their validity is challenged in a proper case. Our case was one of those. And the reason why it was is because my folks lost their freedom. Now, they did not actually go to jail. They were put on probation. They had to get fines, but they could have been incarcerated.
What was probation?
A year. They got a year of probation. And they had to pay fines and costs, which was ridiculous. These are, by the way, again, people in their 70s. 2 of them were in their 70s, never been in trouble in their life. I think I could say Christian folks. So it felt like a very good versus evil thing. Go ahead.
They got probation for a year, and they got fined for showing up to a school board meeting for 40 minutes.
For 34 minutes. I mean, again, they used 41, but they were walking in the building. They didn't even get into the library where the school officials were until 7 minutes later, because they had to walk all the way down the hall. They kept using these numbers that weren't accurate, and then they were only encountering the superintendent and the security officer for a couple of minutes until they said, oh my gosh, go to the cafeteria. The rest of the time was spent in the cafeteria where everybody was distanced like several feet apart. Yeah. And the security officer and the police officer who came, who again, I think was really troubled by the whole thing, they were all standing feet apart from each other. Everybody was so worried at that stage. And they were being incredibly respectful. Everybody there was being incredibly respectful. They even gave a shout out to the police officer. Like, they said, like, we appreciate what you do. We appreciate you coming out here, but do you have to be here? Right. So it was pretty sad. Right.
That's crazy.
You have another question?
No, I mean, well, my question earlier was, what exactly is were there any guidelines with maintaining whatever, like having the mask applied properly in schools?
Again, you heard me read it. The act says they're supposed to be doing it under the ARP-ESSER plan. But that was kind of the joke. So to your point, I argued to the jury, look at this person. There was a child in the room wearing the mask. We all saw it, right? On the ears, below the chin, because that's doing something.
The diaper chin or whatever.
Yeah. Another woman had one hanging off her left ear.
Yeah.
I litigated another case where people were in a workplace doing that. They were just like, well, I'm wearing it. So that was the way they got around it. And that was happening all across America. It was absurd. It was like a theater of the absurd. Like, you go to a restaurant where, COVID-19 is out and it's terrible. And, you have to wear a mask until you sit down because you can't get COVID at 3 or 4 feet. You can get it at 6, but you can't get it down here. And if you've noticed, SARS-CoV-2, COVID doesn't attack people while they're eating. Yeah. Like it won't get you where you're. It's not rude.
It was
wants
nice.
It wants you to eat.
That,
yeah.
Because that'd be bad if it could attack you while you were eating.
Well, it's I guess you call it a polite virus, right? So.
Yeah. No, but people had so many ways of attempting to combat it. I, with my friend Aiden, wore a gas mask in one of my classes as a joke, and was like, "Well, technically, it's better than your mask, so you really can't tell me to take it off." And I did wear that for about half a class period, but that was really hot. That was really uncomfortable.
Well, that's the whole point that the guy that night was making. The respirator does work, at least to an extent, better than not for SARS-CoV, probably not perfect, but would have been better.
Yeah,
you needed. So that's a whole another story we'll cover another time. The lawsuit against Peter Daszak and EcoHealth Alliance with SARS-CoV-2, which was created in a BSL-2 lab. That's a type of security clearance. Should have been more like a BSL-4 because they needed to wear hazmat suits because it was that contagious. Now, again, not deadly, just very communicable. Can be deadly, to some people, and it depended. It attacked people with heart conditions, autoimmune disorders, people with asthma. It was particularly bad for those people.
Yeah. Well, my original question was just because I remember in high school, some teachers cared, most didn't. But, some would say, hey, you're not wearing that properly. But I was just wondering if there was any actual guidelines in their thing to receive the funding for, what they should say to people or do.
Right. So the answer to the question is each school was required to create their own ARP-ESSER plan, which was a health and safety plan. They all had them. East Lycoming had them. Montgomery had them. This is Montgomery. Loyola Psych had one. Williamsport had one. So in their health and safety plan, they could have had guidelines. I can't speak for all of them. There were so many. Every school was required to create this health and safety plan to get the money.
Right.
And so, in this case, we thought this was the one. The people were losing their liberty. It really involved the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So involving 3 separate amendments, we thought we'd get heard. And the question we asked was, where the power to regulate public health is reserved by the 10th Amendment to the states, is it lawful for a local school board to make public health rules otherwise outside of state law, remember they could make it under state law, and solely pursuant to a federal regulation requiring CDC recommendations to be made mandatory rules by those boards receiving federal funds? You had to follow the CDC request. Otherwise, by the way, the CDC has no authority. The Centers for Disease Control doesn't have a police force. It doesn't have an attorney group where they enforce things. They're like an advisory body, like FDA, okay? Like, why do they even exist, right? And we thought they existed because they were supposed to be protecting us, and it turns out that what they're really trying to do is to hurt us. At least in this case, they were. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So that was the question that we asked, and why it's so important. And this is the part I wanted to kind of talk about tonight, and we'll give you guys some screenshots for this stuff, is in the Prince case, Justice Scalia even says that this has been going on for decades. Okay, now that's 1997, so this is a new thing. In the 80s and 90s, they were starting to do this. Do what, Greg? They were. Look, I got all these people, right? 435 members in the House, 100 senators. That's a lot of people, a lot of personalities. I don't want to pass a law. It's too much. Why try and create some big framework, like to create a Medicare type agency or a Civil Rights Act, when we can just give people money and tell them, do this, we'll give you money. So what's another example? National Voter Registration Act of 1993, passed by Clinton. Again, changes the way we do elections, right? We want you to start using electronic devices. We want you to create voter rolls. We want you to monitor the voter rolls. And in order to help you do that, we'll give you some money, right? Then we had what I think now, in my own opinion, was a charade in you were too young for this, but the election of 2000. So if you're old enough to know this, you remember.
I wasn't alive.
Sorry, too young. So the Shad, right? The dreaded Shad. I don't know if anybody else did who's watching this podcast. I was watching for the 78 days. I think it went on with Peter Jennings every night. We're watching these guys with the glasses and the Shad. Is it a hanging Shad? Is it not hanging?
Oh, yeah, right.
So all theater, in my opinion, all designed to get rid of the giant iron machines. When I was a kid, I used to roll in with the big lever. Ching, ching, ching. You could do like party line vote, right? Can't have those. Now, why? Because you can't corrupt those. Can't cheat with them. Can't change these massive punched holes. So we got to get rid of that. So let's have an entire election teeter on, Florida, the Bush versus Gore debate, and then we'll be able to do this. The HAVA, Help America Vote Again Act, right? So this is a law passed in 2002. It says right in here under subtitle B for voluntary guidance, to assist states in meeting the requirements of subtitle A, the commission shall adopt voluntary guidance consistent with such requirements in accordance with the procedures described in section 312. All those recommendations had to be adopted by January 1st, 2004, October 1st, 2003. So now again, if you're going to adopt these recommendations, that's fine, but you don't get the money unless you are following the recommendations, which required you to use the machines. And it even talks about here, funds to be consistent with other laws and requirements. In order to receive a payment under the program, under this section, the state shall provide the administrator with certifications that the state will use the funds under the payment in a manner that is consistent with each of the laws described in section 906, as such laws relate to the provisions of the act, which again was to create machines. So if you've ever seen litigation about the Help America Vote Again Act, if you've talked to your local election official like I have here, and here in Lycoming County, it's almost, again, like borderline absurd. The only machine they use counts the votes. We don't have a machine to vote, right? There's no electronic machine. There was for a period of time. Now there's not. You vote on a ballot, paper ballot. They feed the paper ballot into the machine here in Lycoming County where we're shooting this. And they do that. Why? Because they don't get the money. If they don't do it, they don't get the money. Now, how much money? I saw one case back in the mid 2000s where a city in Wisconsin was getting almost $1 million in one election cycle. So again, give you some money and you'll follow our rules, which is what they did in the HAVA case. I'm trying to find another one here with HAVA so I can show it to you. This one's really small where it talks about how they do this. Where it talks about payments to states for activities to improve administration of elections. So all tied to money. So if you wonder why your local township or municipality, you could be watching this in Maine or Texas, is using machines, go to your director of elections, whoever that may be, and ask them, how much money do you get to use machines from the federal government? And if they're getting money to use those machines, then that's why they're doing it. So because they're getting paid to do it, just like they were to put the mask on the kids, which is why the question we did was so important, because we were trying to say, look, this needs to stop. And here's the thing. It's everything. Like when you see the roads, like they tied the roads to changing the DUI statute. We'll give you federal highway money. The government has been doing this for a long time. It would change the way that our American society works if the Supreme Court would have taken the case and just said the answer is no. Like, we're not going to let the federal government pay local or state governments money to implement federal regulatory schemes. If you want to do it, you've got to do it in accordance with the law. You heard the court say that the 10th Amendment reserves certain things to the states. That's a big question that by the way, we fought a civil war over that. We fought a civil war over the 10th Amendment. Historians can debate that. They tried to make it about slavery. That was part of the question, but most of it was about the 10th Amendment. We want to run our state the way we want to run it. You can't tell us how to do that. And so what happened? We went to war, and over 500,000 Americans died to answer the question. And the question was ultimately answered by consolidating power in the federal government. Again, the Constitution was still alive. In fact, I think Abraham Lincoln's one of the greatest presidents we had, but in any event, that's what we went on. And this case here is all about the 10th Amendment reserving that to the states. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
one of the things I want to talk, I saw this again today. Now the Louisiana governor's talking to Trump about these things. So I'm going to do a podcast just to let you know, kind of segue to the next one. I'm not really sure how long have we been on this one. This is where you being over here makes it difficult for you to tell me.
Yeah, the runtime's on that over there. It's probably like an hour and change.
So one of the things I want to talk about the next one is Trump's use of the military, really the National Guard. There's another article that came out today or yesterday. And now I saw today the Louisiana governor's asking the National Guard to come in. So I'm going to do a podcast on that. We're going to talk about that. That's going to be rather complicated. We'll give you some screenshots of that too. But for tonight, I'm going to give you parts of the transcript. I'm going to give you parts of the Help America Vote Again Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, so you can see that on there. I will also give you a link to this PSEA, so you can see it's a state organization say we got over $6 billion. So you don't have to, again, if you remember what I said in the first one, like, I'm going to prove it to you. Like, I'll show it to you. Go to the site, look yourself. Be like, oh my God, $6 billion. That's a lot of money. So, take a look at this stuff when you get a chance. I want to say this too, because we had some issues last time with the email address. We were going to try and give one and then it didn't work. So I do want you to be able to ask your questions. So for now, put the questions in the comment box on YouTube. My website does have a place where you can start writing me if you want to say, Greg, I had some questions about something you talked about, or if you want to put a comment about something you want us to possibly do a show on. Because I've got all kinds of stuff that I'm going to talk to you about. I've lived a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, and even tonight we're kind of just hitting the highlights of this case, which was very important. And there's more to the story I could tell. It was a one-day trial, by the way. And it was just upsetting because what the judge did at the end kind of sealed the fate, because I'd already told the people in the opening statement that there was no state law that allowed them to implement that on their own. And then he went back and just said, that's not true. And there's, again, longer story behind that. We did the jury instructions in advance of trial. We have to meet with the judge. We agree to those. The judge makes a ruling on what he's going to read. He made a ruling. He was not going to read the illegal court ruling. And then because of the way the trial went, because I kept trying to talk about how the school district didn't have the right to do this, and that under the masking situation under United States Code 360 BBB-3 at small b's, you're required to provide informed consent to the person that you give the device to, which includes jabs, by the way, but also masks. I mean, really, you should have said to people, hey, this mask may cause you to pass out. I went to a LoyalSoc meeting. And again, I'm good at this because I was a lawyer, but I had an older gentleman there. Felt bad for him, but I had to do the lawyer thing to him because we were all trying to go see what they were going to do about masking after we got Montoursville to drop them. And he said, we're going to need you to wear a mask. So he hands me the Chinese mask, the blue fibers, all the same stuff. And I said to him, well, you can ask me to wear that, but do you have the paperwork? And he said, what paperwork? I said, well, you're required by federal law to give me paperwork with informed consent to talk about the risks and complications associated with wearing that mask that you have in the box. There's even warnings on the side of the box, right? And then he had this really befuddled look at his face, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. And then he looked at me and was like, you know what, just try to sit 6 feet apart. And I was like, okay. And of course I didn't. I sat right next to somebody.
Befuddled, that's a good word.
Yeah, so
You
he was
definitely
very,
scared him.
very like, I don't know. I'm just a caveman lawyer. I don't understand. He's very confused. And I was like, well, that's because they're making you do stuff that's illegal, which, and that happens when you don't know what you're doing. So,
Well, I mean, also those masks. I mean, I had friends where they're like, you're supposed to wash these? I'm like, dude, it's been like 2 months of you wearing that. Like, are you okay?
yeah.
It can't smell good. Like your
high school had that really long stairwell. They built a brand new, like $32 million high school. This very long stairwell at the beginning of the school. And I said to the school board, like, if somebody has syncope, whatever the word is, if they pass out, which is one of the risks, by the way, they're going to get sued. I mean, you're going to get sued. Maybe they won't win because of something I'll cover in another thing about sovereign immunity, but you're still going to get sued. Somebody's going to get hurt because they're going to pass out. They can't breathe. And people used to say to me all the time, well, I don't understand what you mean. I said, let me tell you something. I tell every school board the same story. Because I had these guys, so I was always torturing them like this. I'm kidding. I never actually made them do this. But I said, go home to your kid tonight, put a mask on him, and say, Andrew, run 50-yard sprint right now that way. Okay? Let him come back, and then take the mask off. Andrew, run 50-yard sprint that way. When he comes back, say to him, was it harder to breathe with the mask on when you ran the sprint?
I had to do that every night or I wouldn't have dinner.
No dinner. That's it. I said, because I said I have
dropped
to
down
have
to like 120 pounds.
a lot of sweating.
Weeks after that, yeah.
Yeah, well, I had to be able to prove the point, folks. So if I didn't have a real test, I was like, how do I know if I don't have a real test?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so with that, we will sign off. We are going to, as I said, do a plug. I've got a plug for a really beautiful dog. We're going to try and add to this. His name is Bandit. Shot a little video at the house walking him. So
What kind of dog?
he is a husky. So stick around for that. In fact, that may be the only reason you start watching this podcast, see the really cool dog. So we typically don't rehome dogs, but he needs a home. He was living in a car. There's threats of somebody shooting him and stuff, so we can't have that. So he is with us for Neo. We're taking great care of him, but we need to find him a forever home. He's a good dog, and he really wants a family, for sure. In fact, the other night he made that pretty clear to me. But anyway, so we'll watch the video. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
So our rescue for this week is going to be Bandit. Bandit came to us from some folks that we know because he was living in a car. So we are actually looking for a Bandit to find a new home. He's a very good looking fella, all husky. He's a little bit older, and as you can see, he loves walks.